You walk into a restaurant, eat a delicious meal, and then something weird happens. The server brings you a little piece of paper with numbers on it, and suddenly everyone expects you to do the math and add extra money on top of what you already owe. Now, this extra money isn't for more food or a fancy hat. It's called a tip, and somehow it became this thing that everyone just does without really understanding why. Today, I'll explain tipping culture to you like you're 5 years old, and by the end, you'll understand why some people think tipping is wonderful and generous, while others think it's a sneaky way for restaurants to avoid paying their workers properly. Let's start with what tipping actually is. Imagine you have a lemonade stand and you're selling cups of lemonade for $1 each. A customer comes up, buys a cup, and then says, "You know what? You were so nice and that lemonade was so good, here's an extra quarter, just because I want to." The extra quarter is a tip. It's money that you give someone on top of what you're supposed to pay, usually because you think that they did a good job or were extra nice to you. Now, tipping didn't start in America. It actually came from fancy rich people in Europe a really long time ago. Picture this. Wealthy people would visit big fancy houses and they would give small amounts of money to the servants who helped them during their stay. It was like saying, "Thank you for making my bed and bringing me my tea." These rich visitors wanted to show off how much money they had, and giving little gifts of money to servants was one way to do it. When wealthy Americans traveled to Europe and saw this tipping thing, they thought it looked very sophisticated and fancy, so they brought back the idea to America. At first, many Americans didn't like it at all. They thought it was un-American because America was supposed to be the place where everyone was equal, and tipping seemed like it was creating a system where some people were servants and others were masters. Some people even tried to ban tipping because they thought it was insulting to workers and went against American values of equality. But then something happened that changed everything. After the Civil War ended, many newly freed enslaved people needed jobs. Restaurant owners and other business owners figured out that they could hire these workers and pay them almost nothing, expecting that customers would give them tips to make up the difference. This was a very sneaky way for business owners to get cheap labor while making customers feel like they were being generous. Think about it like this. Imagine your parents hired someone to clean your room, but instead of paying them a fair amount, they paid them just a tiny bit and then told you that you should give the cleaner some of your allowance money if you thought they did a good job. That would be weird, right? I mean, your parents should just pay the cleaner properly themselves, but that's basically what happened with tipping in America. Over time, the system became normal, especially in restaurants. Restaurant owners realized that they could pay their servers very little money per hour and then just expect the customer to make up the difference with tips. The government even made special rules that allowed restaurants to pay tipped workers much less than the regular minimum wage. It's like having two different sets of rules for how much you have to pay people, depending on whether customers are expected to tip them or not. Here's where it gets tricky though. In most jobs, your boss pays you a set amount of money for doing your work. And that's it. If you work at a store folding clothes, you get paid the same amount whether you fold 10 shirts or 100 shirts, and whether customers are happy or grumpy. But servers in restaurants work differently. They get paid a tiny amount from their boss, sometimes as little as $2 or $3 an hour, and then they have to hope that the customers will tip them enough to make a living wage. This creates a very weird situation where servers have to be extra nice and friendly to customers, not just because it's good customer service, but because their ability to pay rent and buy groceries depends on whether customers decide to tip them well. It's like if your allowance depended on whether your little sister thought that you were nice to her each week. Some weeks she might think that you were great and give you lots of money, and other weeks she might be in a bad mood and give you nothing, even if you did the exact same thing. For customers, this system creates pressure as well. When you go to a restaurant, you're not just paying for food anymore, you're also expected to judge how well your server did their job and pay them accordingly. But here's the problem. Most customers don't really know what makes a good server versus a bad one. Maybe your food took a long time to come out, but that might be because the kitchen was busy, not because your server was being lazy. Maybe your server seemed unfriendly, but they might have been having a bad day or dealing with a difficult customer at another table. Some people love the tipping system though because they feel it gives them power. They can reward servers who they think did a great job and give less money to servers who they think didn't try hard enough. It makes them feel generous and important. These people argue that tipping motivates servers to work harder and provide better service because their pay depends on making customers happy. Other people think the tipping system is unfair and should be eliminated. They point out that servers' income becomes unpredictable and can depend on things that have nothing to do with how well they did their job. A server might make great money on a busy Friday night when everyone's in a good mood, but they might also make nothing on a slow Tuesday when customers are stressed about work and don't tip well. The tipping system also creates inequality amongst workers. Servers at expensive restaurants can make a lot of money in tips because 20% of a $100 meal is $20. But servers at cheaper restaurants might work just as hard, but make much less money because 20% of a $20 meal is only $4. It's like if two kids did the exact same chores, but one got paid more just because their family happened to have more money. There's also the issue of discrimination in tipping. Studies have shown that customers sometimes tip differently based on things like the server's race, gender, or age, even when the service is exactly the same. This means that some servers might consistently make less money than others, not because they're worse at their job, but because of prejudice that they can't control. Some restaurants have tried to get rid of tipping by paying their servers higher wages and including service charges in the menu prices, and this is called a no-tipping policy. The idea is that customers pay one price that covers everything, including fair wages for the staff, and they don't have to worry about calculating tips or judging service. Some customers love this because it makes dining out simpler and more predictable. Others don't really like it because they feel they've lost the ability to reward good service or punish bad service. The debate about tipping gets even more complicated when you consider other countries. In many parts of Europe and Asia, tipping either doesn't exist or is very different from American tipping culture. In Japan, for example, tipping can actually be considered rude because it implies that the person wasn't already doing their best job. In Australia, servers are paid full wages, and tipping is optional and usually only for exceptional service. When Americans travel to these countries, they often feel confused about whether or not to tip, and locals might be confused by American tourists who insist on tipping for normal service. Meanwhile, the American tipping system has spread far beyond just restaurants. Now we're expected to tip hairdressers, taxi drivers, delivery people, hotel housekeepers, baristas, and even people who work at places where we pick up our own food. Some coffee shops have tip jars, and some payment systems at stores now ask if you want to add a tip even when all the worker did was ring up your purchase. This tip creep has made many people feel like they are constantly being asked to pay extra money on top of already high prices. For workers, the tipping system creates a complicated relationship with their income. Some servers prefer it because they can potentially make more money than they would with a fixed wage, especially if they're good at connecting with customers and work at busy restaurants. They like having some control over their earnings and the possibility of making more money during busy periods or holidays. But other workers find the system stressful and unpredictable. They never know how much money they'll make from week to week, which makes it a bit hard to budget for expenses like rent, car payments, or groceries. They might work extra hard during a slow period and still go home with very little money, or they might have customers who don't tip well regardless of the service quality. The tipping system also affects how restaurants operate. Because labor costs are lower when servers are paid mostly through tips, restaurants can keep their menu prices lower than they would if they had to pay full wages to all their staff. This can make restaurants more competitive and attractive to price-conscious customers, but it also means that the true cost of dining out is hidden from customers until they get the bill and have to calculate the tip. Some economists argue that the tipping system is inefficient because it creates uncertainty for both workers and customers. They say it would be better to have transparent pricing where the cost of service is included in the menu prices, so everyone knows exactly what they're paying up front. Others argue that tipping creates better customer service because servers have a direct financial incentive to make customers happy. The COVID-19 pandemic brought new attention to tipping culture. When restaurants were closed or limited to takeout only, many servers actually lost their jobs or saw their income drop dramatically. This highlighted just how vulnerable workers are when their income depends largely on tips. Some people started tipping more generously to help workers during a difficult time, while others reduced their tipping because they were facing their own financial challenges. The pandemic also accelerated the growth of food delivery services, which created new questions about tipping. Should you tip the delivery driver the same amount you would tip a server in a restaurant? What about when you're already paying delivery fees and service charges? These new situations have made tipping even more confusing for many people. Some states and cities have started changing their laws about tipped wages. A few places have actually eliminated the separate minimum wage for tipped workers, requiring employers to pay everyone the same minimum wage regardless of whether they receive tips. Supporters of these changes argue that it provides more stability and fairness for workers. Critics worry that it might lead to higher menu prices and reduced employment in restaurants, though. The technology that we use to pay for things has also changed tipping culture. Credit card machines and payment apps now often suggest tip amounts or ask customers to select the preset tipping options. Some people feel pressured by these prompts, though, and end up tipping more than they intended, while others appreciate having the math done for them. Young people growing up with this system often feel confused about the rules of tipping. I mean, how much should you tip? When should you tip? What happens if you can't afford to tip? These aren't questions with clear answers, and different people will give you different advice. Some say that you should always tip at least 15%. Others say 20% is the new standard, and still others say you should tip based on the quality of service regardless of percentages. The tipping debate reflects even bigger questions, though, about fairness, economics, and how we treat workers. Should businesses be responsible for paying their employees a livable wage, or is it okay to rely on customers to make up the difference? Should workers' income depend on customers' generosity and mood, or should it be predictable and stable? These are complicated questions that don't have easy answers. What makes this especially tricky is that the tipping system affects real people's lives. Servers, delivery drivers, and other tipped workers are trying to pay their bills and support their families. Customers are trying to be fair while managing their own budgets. Restaurant owners are trying to run profitable businesses while dealing with high costs and competition. Everyone in the system has legitimate concerns and interests. So, here's what we've learned about this whole tipping adventure. Tipping started as a way for rich people to show off in Europe, came to America where some people hated it, but then became a sneaky way for businesses to pay workers less money while making customers feel responsible for making up the difference. Nowadays, some people think it's great because they get to decide how much to pay based on service, while others think that it's unfair because workers' income becomes unpredictable and depends on customers' moods and prejudices. It's like a big complicated game where nobody really agrees on the rules, but everyone has to play anyway. Now go forth and tip with confidence of someone who actually understands why this whole system exists in the first place, even if it still seems pretty weird.